Bonjour et bienvenue sur Conférence de Presse. Hello and welcome to this press conference. I'm Elizabeth Thompson with CBC News. With us today, we have Member of Parliament Richard Cannings for South Okanagan, West Kootenay, and Barbara Barrett from the FDFA. And with us virtually, we have Mayor Jim Diodati from Niagara Falls, Mayor Mike Bradley from Sarnia, Pauline Quinlan, former Mayor of Bromont, and Alexandra Bachand from Phillipsburg Duty Free. Mr. Cannings or Ms. Barrett, if you'd like to begin.
Good morning. I would like to thank the media for joining us today. My name is Barbara Barrett, and I am the Executive Director of the Frontier Duty Free Association. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that this virtual and in-person press conference with participants across the country is taking place on unceded Indigenous lands. Our communities are historically known as gathering places for many First Nations, and today they are home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within our communities. I'm here today on behalf of border communities and border businesses which throughout the pandemic have been the hardest hit of the hardest hit. Border communities during the pandemic have been penalized by severe federal measures that have not been applied to either air travel or domestic travel. Inexplicably, this federal government has punished border communities with inconsistent and incoherent border travel rules. Yesterday's timid announcement by federal ministers further solidifies that this government doesn't understand border communities, or worse, doesn't care. The ministers announced that the vaccine mandates were no longer required unvaccinated Canadians to travel by air or train with complete strangers, but doesn't allow Canadians to travel in their own car from Detroit to Windsor. Border businesses that depend on U.S. tourism are still 50% down from 2019. The business supports have been ended. There is no scientific basis for these measures to be maintained at the border while they are dropped for other travel, as stated by health experts. I will now turn over to MP Richard Cannings, who knows very well the current plight of our border communities as an MP of a beautiful tourism and border community in British Columbia, as well as one of his many roles as the VP of the All-Party Tourism Caucus. MP Cannings, I yield the floor to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And yeah, as was mentioned, I have a very beautiful riding. It really depends on tourism. Tourism is one of the main the pillars of the economy there. I have 6 border crossings in my riding. I don't know of any riding in Canada that may have that number or more, but we really depend in normal times on that cross-border traffic, and especially some of the businesses, especially the duty-free stores at those border crossings have been, they've been down 95% in terms of business. And so we've been anxiously awaiting as things open up and see that tourism increase. We are very much, as the NDP caucus especially, has been very much in favor of restrictions to keep Canadians safe in travel and in their line of work. But we have been calling for many months for a safe border task force, a safe border strategy that would bring together stakeholders to, build a system that makes sense for all Canadians to keep us safe, but also keep businesses going. And Brian Massey, the MP for Windsor West, has been at the forefront of that, and I just wanted to give him a shout out for that. But we are happy to see some of the restrictions released as of yesterday. There's still some of the aspects, especially things like the Arrive Can app, which I've had my constituents very concerned because a lot of seniors don't have phones, don't know what an app is, and yet they have to produce that when they come back into Canada. So we are asking for a real plan that makes sense for Canadians and for travelers so that our border towns, whether it's Osoyoos or Trail or Grand Forks in my riding or Windsor or some of the other Niagara Falls, some of the other major border crossings across the country can get back into and get their businesses going again in a safe way. So I will leave it there, but I appreciate this, the efforts that are going on here today, and I would like now to turn it over to Mayor Diodati of Niagara Falls.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the words from our Member of Parliament, and I'd echo all the comments that he made. This has been a huge challenge, and I don't need to tell anyone, the last 2 years have been devastating for tourism. And here in Niagara, 40,000 people count on tourism to feed their families. We've always said, follow the science. Well, the scientists are telling us now that there's no reason to have the ArriveCan app. We appreciate the announcement of yesterday, but it's a half step. We need some full steps, and we don't have time for dithering. Right now, in this situation, it's a man-made disaster that we're dealing with. We're just about to kick off the tourism season, and this is supposed to be the great recovery. And what are we doing? We need to open things up. And I understand they've put more money in the budget for ArriveCan, another $25 million. Please take that money and give it to us to help us market the reopening of the border. Because what's happening right now, Americans are showing up in their minivan with their family at the border with no knowledge of the ArriveCan app. They don't have roaming. They can't download the app. There's a lineup of cars behind them. They can't get into the country. So I'll tell you something. You upset your customers, they go back and tell all their friends. And many people are bypassing Canada, and that's going to have long-lasting effects on this country. It's more than a $100 billion industry in this country. We need to do everything that we can to open things up. And as well, I'd echo the comments of our Member of Parliament that seniors have been calling me, and the numbers have been alarming, and they're feeling discriminated against. They're feeling that, you know, I'm willing to prove that I'm a Canadian with my passport. I'm willing to prove that I've been vaccinated, even had my booster. But I cannot prove that I can use digital technology because I have a flip phone or I don't have a phone. And the answer they get your kids or your grandkids to do it for you. Anyone that's been through this will realize that's very unreasonable. And what we're going to do, we're going to, because of some inaction, we're going to kill our opportunity at a tourism season. And here in Niagara, 50% of the revenue comes from Americans. So we're pleading to our counterparts in Ottawa, do the right thing and do it now. Thank you. I'd like to now introduce Mayor Musi, who's going to continue on with her comments.
Oui, bonjour. Oui, bonjour. Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Can you hear me? Oui. Bonjour, alors good morning. Mon nom est Pauline Quinlan. J'ai pris la relève de Mme Musi. Moi, je suis une mairesse retraitée depuis quelques années. J'ai été à la tête d'une ville pendant 19 ans, une ville touristique, la ville de Bromont, au Québec, dans la région de Brome-Missisquoi. Et tout comme vous, nous avons actuellement un réel problème avec ArriveCan, entre autres. Dans la région ici, nous avons de nombreux événements qui attirent les Américains, des compétitions équestres à caractère international, entre autres. Et vous pouvez imaginer la frustration de ces visiteurs qui, lorsqu'ils se présentent à la frontière, n'ont pas toujours les informations concernant nos exigences. Je pense que le gouvernement fédéral doit tenir compte de la situation. Je pense que ArriveCan est un moyen qui n'est plus utile actuellement. Et je pense que l'économie actuelle ici, au Canada, au Québec et dans notre région, va souffrir si ces exigences-là sont maintenues. Alors, encore une fois, pour le bénéfice du tourisme, pour le bénéfice de nos commerces, pour le bénéfice également de d'autres secteurs d'activité, je citerai ici, nous avons un centre de recherche microélectronique qui est parrainé par IBM Canada. Et dans ce domaine-là également, nous avons de nombreux visiteurs qui se rendent ici et qui sont extrêmement frustrés. Alors, encore une fois, tout comme vous, je demande que le gouvernement canadien, que M. Trudeau reconsidère cette approche-là et puis qu'il puisse permettre qu'on continue à développer nos activités touristiques. C'est une manne importante pour le Canada et le Québec. Merci.
I believe I'm speaking next to Mayor Bradley of Sarnia, and I'm looking out my window right now at Port Huron, Michigan. We are no different than in previous times, like Ottawa and Hull. You just went back and forth, and you had a regular relationship. And as Mayor Diodati said, what's happening now is we head into the peak tourism season. People come here to visit here, but they're also heading to Stratford and to Niagara Falls and to Toronto. And I give a good example overnight. A business person told me he had some American businesses coming in here, business people. They're not coming. The app, they don't understand, and they don't understand the use of it. And what we've seen, and I have to say, we're the Rodney Dangerfield of cities right now, because we're not treated with respect by the federal government. Through the 22 months of the border issues, we stood with the federal government. We met regularly by Zoom with them, and now we're just on the back burner. And we don't even seem to be part of the discussion going on as it relates to airport and rail and all the other things. And it's like a boa constrictor on our communities. It's just squeezing the economy when we should be going in the other direction. And we stood by them for those 22 months, and now we can't even get them to respond to the needs that we have. And I just want to conclude by saying that it's going to be a very tough summer still for all of us. With, as was mentioned, the benefits and the support system is gone. Yet the traffic we expected to get from the United States isn't going to happen to the degree that we need it. It's a bit like being in a Monty Python skit. This has become very silly. The rules are inconsistent, and they are disrespectful of border cities that have stood by the federal government in the last 2 years. And with that, I turn it back to Barbara.
Thank you very much, Mayors and MP Cannings. At this point, we are welcoming media questions.
Okay. Time for questions. If anyone is watching this by Zoom, if you could use the raised hand function to indicate that you would like to ask a question. First question goes to Cormac McSweeney from Citi.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so I apologize. I came in a little bit late when starting to record this, so correct me if I'm wrong on this. You guys want to get rid of the ArriveCan app and all vaccination requirements at the land border. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Just wondering whether you've had any direct conversations with any of the ministers in charge of the border, and if so, what has their response been to your requests to extend the vaccination rule changes to the land border and scrapping the ArriveCan app?
Is that question?
Jim, do you want to go ahead first?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Thanks, Mayor Bradley. I've spoken with our federal tourism minister and public safety ministers about this, and I understand the decisions coming right from the top. And I suggested, well, why don't we start by removing the ArriveCan app requirement for all land border crossings? And if you want to leave them for now at the airports, then so be it. But at least, and the majority of the crossings do happen at land border crossings. In Niagara, we've got 4 crossings, and it works out to be typically 10 million cars and trucks per year. So we said, why don't we start there? So as it is, we typically have a log jam. And this year, of course, with this uncertainty and the confusion and the labyrinth of rules at the border with this ArriveCan app, it's going to be a disaster at the border if the Americans even choose to come. So I've had that discussion. Seems to me that they felt that was a reasonable request, but this is going to have to come right from the top.
Yeah, I can add to that that is the problem. There seems to be within the Liberal government support, and that's what we hear back. But we're not getting the PMO, which seems very distracted from the border city issue, to make the decision. And we've been successful. And again, we've worked with them over and over again. And now it just seems like we just don't matter. And that's the key. We need this decision made, to, at least on the app, to be removed now. We're about to hit going to the July 4th Canada Day weekend, And if it was removed, I can guarantee you there would be a significant increase in traffic.
And if I can jump in, I would say, you know, I've had conversations with the Minister of Tourism, Parliamentary Secretary for Health. My concerns are mainly around the ArriveCAN app. I don't want to second guess the science around the need for vaccination requirements, but I think we can keep those and just have people show their proof of vaccination at the border, just like you do when you used to have to when you got on a plane. It's the ArriveCAN app that we have heard repeatedly. There's been many questions in question period that tell stories of people who have been trapped on the other side of the border and forced to do a 2-week quarantine, even though they've been fully vaccinated, have been fined thousands of dollars, even though they've been fully quarantined, simply because they didn't have the app, didn't use the app, used it incorrectly. You know, that's, I think, where the main concern that I have and others that I've heard here. It's, I'm sure it's convenient to track people in terms of vaccination, but I think it is not completely necessary and is a huge barrier to Canadians and Americans alike crossing the border.
All right, and I guess I'll do a follow-up then. I believe I heard someone, possibly the mayor of Niagara, say that it's about $10 billion in economic activity around border towns and things like that. If you could confirm that, and also I'm just wondering if somebody could lay out the full economic scale. How many jobs are dependent on increasing business this summer at the land border, and how much economic activity will it bring to the country?
So the number that I quoted was more than $100 billion, $105 billion for tourism and hospitality in Canada. And that's at risk right now. That's the number. As far as jobs go here in Niagara, it's 40,000 jobs directly affected by tourism, 40,000 people counting on tourism to feed their families. And I'll also mention that we all, as Mayor Bradley said, we all supported the federal government with all the restrictions at the border. We stood shoulder to shoulder with them to make sure that we were safe. And we all understood that we had to follow the science. But the science is now telling us that having these restrictions at the border no longer are serving us. As a matter of fact, in the beginning, it was to keep the virus out. Well, it's clearly here, and it's not doing what it was originally intended to do. So let's follow the scientists like Dr. Zane Chagla from McMaster, who are saying these restrictions at the border are not helping.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, the fact is that everyone was in a mood of recovery. And it was mentioned earlier that every border mayor can tell you horror stories of people coming back, people in the same party that went to Mexico come back and spend 2 weeks in quarantine, the other 2 cross the border. There's no consistency. And it's arbitrary. You know, and again, it's been mentioned, we stood by the government through some very difficult times for our community because we understood the end game was to get us back to a better place. Now we're seeing the border cities in particular are being punished. We're being punished by not being recognized that this need for this app has gone, and you can't justify its continued existence. I don't know how we get Ottawa's attention on this, because this is one means of doing it, but it is hurting economically when we can't afford it.
Est-ce que je pourrais ajouter? Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, on vous entend.
Oui, j'aimerais ajouter aussi, bon, on parle de l'économie en général, mais ce matin, on est préoccupé également par les activités des boutiques hors taxes qui, durant la pandémie, ont dû fermer, évidemment. Et maintenant qu'il y a reprise avec ces exigences-là, ce commerce-là est en souffrance. Maybe I should add in English that the different businesses near the borders, including the free tax businesses, are really, really suffering. And I think that the government has to take that into consideration also for that sector of activity.
Thank you. Next question, James McCartan, Canadian Press.
Hi, all. Hope you can hear me. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it. I'm coming to you from DC, and I'm wondering the extent to which, because we in these discussions over the course of the last 2 years, it seems as though the real traction has come when we've seen U.S. lawmakers speak up on behalf of their constituents. Have you guys had any conversations recently on the specific issue of ArriveCan with your counterparts on the other side of the border, with any of the U.S. lawmakers, you know, the various members of Congress who have spoken up about these various border issues over the last couple of years? And if not, is that part of your plan going forward?
I can jump in first on this one. I do regularly speak with Congressman Higgins, Brian Higgins, as well as cross-border mayors, Mayor Byron Brown in Buffalo and Robert Ray Stano in Niagara Falls, New York. And they're loving the situation right now. And I'll tell you why, because Canadians can easily and freely go to the U.S. and spend all of our hard-earned disposable income. And with the latest measure of removing vaccine mandates for people not vaccinated Canadians to travel to the U.S., again, it gives us a chance to go spend all of our money in the U.S., but we're not being reciprocated. So although they think it's ridiculous, and although all the lawmakers along the border have huge Canadian connections, matter of fact, Brian Higgins used to play hockey in Niagara, and his wife's Canadian, and he's been here and he comes here regularly. He said on one hand, he goes, he's so frustrated with the ridiculousness of what's going on and the imbalances. On the other end, he goes, but the silver lining for them is they're winning because Canadians are spending all of their money in the U.S., but the Americans are not spending it here.
Well, it's a very cordial relationship in border cities. However, the Americans, and I give them credit, are great at their own self-interest. When we went through the blockade in Windsor and disruptions on the 402 in Sarnia just a few months ago, they were using it as an economic development tool to keep industries in their own country instead of coming here. And so we're not getting the same traction with them on this issue. But I think that the key on this is that what it's doing is continuing to punish border cities in Canada for what they've been trying to do, which is to recover. And, you know, in the end of this, that, you know, we can't go through another summer of not having the most opportune way to bring people over here. And again, the app is now a disaster. You know, you can't. I mean, when the government says, you know, they're going to keep it, and Jim mentioned more money going into it, you know, have they actually looked at the results and what the benefits are? And any person looking at it objectively would say they're not there anymore. So, you know, I've learned a long time ago, I've been in politics a long time, when you're riding a dead horse, dismount. And that's what the federal government needs to do.
James, do you have a follow-up?
No, there's no way I could follow up on that last quote, so thank you so much.
Sure. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question? Those in the queue. Y a-t-il d'autres questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. This ends this press conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Merci.
Merci.
Merci.